After being reborn, I finally decided to let go of William. He wanted to make a name for himself in the capital, so I simply chose to move abroad. He liked the little secretary by his side, so I immediately called off the engagement. In my previous life, I trapped him for an entire lifetime with a piece of marriage paper. He and Diana never got to be together openly until the end of his life. But it wasn't until I grew old and lonely in the nursing home that I realized I had been trapped for an entire lifetime as well. Chapter 1. After being reborn, I made the decision to let go of William. As soon as I was reborn, I submitted the application form that had been sitting in my computer for so long. The moment I saw the admission notice, it felt like a lifetime had passed. My mentor, who had always urged me to go abroad for my PhD, sighed in relief. I've been advising you to study abroad, but you said your fiancé was working in the capital and refused to leave. Now, you've finally made up your mind. Speaking of William, he was truly a son of heaven. He came from a wealthy family and had started his own business at a young age. He was already well known in the industry and was in the prime of his career. As for me, besides having good grades, I didn't stand out in any other aspect. If it weren't for the agreement between our families from when they were young, there was no way William and I would ever have been matched. I looked at my mentor with clear eyes. This time, I want to try walking my own path. My mentor patted me on the shoulder. A PhD is long and lonely. You need to be mentally prepared. No matter how long it would be, it wouldn't be as long as the previous life. In my previous life, I gave up the opportunity to study abroad for my PhD. The Koo family pressured us to get married. Less than a month after we got married, I became pregnant. And from then on, I was trapped in household chores. William Koo thought his duty was fulfilled and rarely returned home. He was busy with his career and socializing. The company, which had already become somewhat well-known, expanded rapidly, and he was flying all over the place. But no matter where he went, Diana, as his secretary, was always by his side. She not only managed his work but also took care of his personal life. Meanwhile, I was stuck in the Koo household, raising children and taking care of the elderly. Our son grew up in a widowed family, and I always thought he was overly dependent on me, until one day, I saw him engaged to Diana's niece. In the private room, he was as casual as could be, smiling as he picked up his teacup and said, "Mom, have some tea." A month later, he finally came clean to me, his tone indifferent. He said, "Mom, Dad is a career-oriented man. You, a housewife, trapped him for a lifetime, and that's enough." He continued, "He's already done better than most men. He's given you dignity. You can't be so greedy and want everything." He believed that only William was trapped by the marriage, and I was just meant to be the sacrificial lamb of family life. But why was that? When we were young, I asked him about his willingness. He agreed to the marriage arranged by our elders. For that, I gave up my career and my dreams. He worked hard to build his career, but I also worked tirelessly taking care of his parents. He socialized and drank outside, while I had to manage the daily meals for the entire family. During the hardest times, I would hold our son in one arm and carry a registration slip in the other. I ran up and down taking his parents to see the doctor, buying medicine, and paying the fees. As he approached 50, he rose higher in his career, making great strides. Meanwhile, my world became smaller and smaller, and life held me captive. At this point, everyone said I was unworthy of him. Everyone urged me to let go. Even my son, whom I had raised. He felt that Diana should be the one standing by his side. But I refused. The last time I had an argument with my son, he left me standing on the street. As I slowly fell down, I looked at his retreating back, feeling an overwhelming sense of regret. If I could do it all over again, I would never, ever give up my life. When I got back to the apartment, I put away the admission notice and turned to the kitchen to bake a tray of egg tarts. This apartment belonged to the Koo family. It was convenient for me to go to school, so William and I lived here together. On the calendar in the living room, I had drawn a large red circle. Only half a month left. Then I would be able to leave this place and live the life I had always wanted. Chapter 2. Just as I finished drawing, William returned. The door opened, and behind him was a timid woman, Diana and her niece. When Diana saw me opening the door, she smiled gently, and the mole at the corner of her eye twitched. Nicole. William asked me to come up for a visit. I'm sorry to trouble you again. The little girl, a frequent visitor, smelled the sweet aroma in the air and dashed into the kitchen, eagerly helping herself to the sweets from the tray. There were 6 tarts on the tray, 2 for each of them. They were happily dividing them, except there was none for me. When I came out of the kitchen, the 3 of them were huddled together, chatting and laughing. The moment the egg tart entered their mouths, all 3 of them spat it out at the same time. Aunt, it's so bitter. I stood motionless, while William rushed around, fetching water and serving tea. In the end, Diana left with red-rimmed eyes, the mole on her face now a deep crimson. Her voice was still generous. William, Nicole just has a possessive nature. Don't argue with her, okay? William said nothing, merely escorting her out. When he returned, I picked up another tray of egg tarts. William hesitated, then explained, Anna is the orphan of my brother. Before he passed, he asked me repeatedly to look after Diana. Since you make such delicious desserts, I thought I'd let the child try them. I remained silent. He stiffly dropped a sentence. If you mind this so much, I won't bring them here again. The next day, I got up early to pack my things, preparing to go to the nearby city in a couple of days. Since I had already decided to break off the engagement, I needed to make it clear as soon as possible. It was out of respect, and also to avoid any future entanglements. As I was packing, I found a little clay doll. It was a gift from William when we were kids. At that time, he had promised earnestly, his chubby little hands covered in clay stains. Nicole, Mom said when you grow up, you'll be my wife. So I'm giving this to you. The little dolls ended up in my suitcase. I no longer wanted them, and I no longer wanted him either. I stood up and drew a big X on the calendar in the living room. Only 14 days left. Then I would leave this place and live the life I had always dreamed of. That evening, William came back very late. He glanced at the food on the table and casually said, I've already eaten outside. A man who sneaks around doesn't even bother to wipe the corner of his mouth. After the last incident, he knew bringing Diana home would only make me upset, so he ate outside instead. At least I didn't cook his dinner. After dinner, I went to my room to organize my materials and do my final preparations before school started. William quietly appeared behind me. I closed the computer and asked, What's up? He was silent for a moment, then said, I'm about to book the wedding and hotel. How about September 1st for the date? What a perfect date. It happened to be the day I started school. I looked up and stared at William. 3 seconds later, he averted his gaze. In my previous life, he had treated our relationship like a business transaction, dating, marriage, having children, and supporting the family. To outsiders, he seemed to be handling it perfectly, but only I could feel his detachment and indifference. It wasn't until the very end of my life that I realized he had probably never been happy with this marriage from the very beginning. But in the end, it was only I who withered in this union. So I asked him, William, have you thought this through? He froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to ask this. Then I heard the exact same answer as in my previous life. He said, Nicole, you're the only woman I recognize as my wife. This time, I didn't hesitate. I said, marriage is a big decision. We should talk to our parents first. The date isn't urgent. Let's wait a little longer. He let out a sigh of relief and quickly changed the subject. You're still reading English literature so late? Don't overwork yourself. That was my entrance assignment. In this life, I was going to choose the path I hadn't chosen before. I wanted to see how wonderful Nicole's life could be without William. The next day, William woke up early. When I got up, there was a bowl of crab roe wontons from Nanching on the table. It was my favorite. He was rarely this considerate, and I waited to see what he would do next. Sure enough, William hesitated before speaking. Nicole, I can't go with you to your parents' house this time. Anna is sick, and Diana can't take care of her alone. Only then did I pick up my chopsticks. I hadn't figured out what excuse to give him to prevent him from following me back. This worked perfectly. He had his reason. and I had mine. Seeing me agree, William hurriedly left the house. I glanced at the calendar on the wall, only 13 days left. Today, I was going home to break off the engagement. The Koo family had treated me well, but it wouldn't be hard to call off the engagement. All I had to do was tell them that William's future was bright, and he was about to soar. And as for me and him, we just weren't a good match anymore. Chapter 3. The living room of the Koo family was quiet and oppressive. I sat quietly on the side, silently turning the teacup in my hand. Aunt Koo opened her mouth several times, but then swallowed her words. Over the past few years, she had heard a lot about Diana. After holding her words for a while, she finally said, "Even if he has Diana in his heart, you two are still engaged. If he dares not marry you, I will take care of him." It was Uncle Koo who made the final decision. "Since you've decided to break off the engagement, we respect your choice. But Nicole, our family's relationship will remain unchanged. The Koo family will always support you." William was now the golden boy in everyone's eyes, so even his own parents couldn't understand why I was so determined to break off the engagement. But I understood, when it came to this marriage, they likely had their own secret expectations. Now that I had taken the initiative to call it off, it was considered courteous. This was good. From now on, I no longer wanted any connection with William or the Koo family. After all, in the end, they were a family, not me. The engagement was called off, to avoid any complications. I lied and told them that William was too busy and that it was his idea for me to come home alone. Aunt Koo, upon hearing this, seemed genuinely guilty. She persuaded me to stay with them a little longer before I left. I didn't mind staying, as I didn't want to return to that small apartment and spend every day and night with William. I stayed at the Koo family's house for 10 days. During that time, William made only one phone call. Once he knew I was at the Koo family's house, he didn't call again. He was still the same as before. When it came to our relationship, he treated it like a business matter. No care, no emotional outbursts. When I got back home, I immediately drew 10 big red crosses on the calendar. Only 4 days left. Just 4 more days. I was carrying my luggage back home when I heard the sound of the door opening. William was standing outside, but behind him were Diana and Anna. "You're back?" William looked surprised when he saw me. Diana, with a poised expression, kissed Anna on the head before casually entering my room. I frowned when I saw her naturally closing the door behind her. The living room was a mess. Upon closer inspection, everything in sight was my stuff. I turned to look at William. He appeared somewhat embarrassed. "Well, Diana's house leaked from the heavy rain a couple of days ago, so she's temporarily staying here for a couple of days. I figured you weren't here, and there wasn't much stuff, so I let her stay in your room." I still hadn't told him about the broken engagement. And yet, the two of them didn't even try to be discreet. Facing my cold, indifferent gaze, William, in a tone as if offering a favor, said, "You can move into my room for now. Stay in my bed for a while." He opened the door to his room as he spoke. "By the way, where are all your books? Why are there only so few things here?" Of course, I had moved everything out. I sold them. I figured I wouldn't need them after we got married. I explained indifferently. William frowned. "Even if you're married, they might still be useful. Self-improvement is important at any time." "Well, if you wanted to sell them, go ahead." He knew everything, but he didn't care. He had watched me get consumed by that family. And as the beneficiary of all this, William seemed quite pleased with himself. But he shouldn't have been. To enjoy my sacrifices while also being infatuated with Diana's ambitious, career-driven persona. I bit my lip and stayed silent. Seeing me remain quiet, he finally spoke again. "By the way, what did your parents say?" William took the bag I was holding. I hesitated for a moment. "I had someone check the dates, and they're not favorable. We'll talk about it later." There were still 4 days left. I used this excuse to buy some more time. "When I leave, I'll explain everything clearly to him." William sighed in relief and then smiled awkwardly. He glanced at the calendar in the living room. "Looks like we'll have to find another good date." With that, he headed to the kitchen to cook. He didn't even notice what I had drawn on the calendar. I stared at William's household registration book on the desk by the window. Just as I was about to get up to help, I heard the faint sounds of conversation from the other room. The man's voice was low, the woman's voice was soft and playful, and the child's voice was cute. I quietly sat back down. Actually, now that the engagement was over, it wasn't appropriate for us to continue living together, and especially not in the same room. But with only 4 days left, I couldn't find a suitable place to rent. After thinking for a moment, I realized that the only thing left to do was to eat the meal, and before going to bed, I'd lay down in the living room. Chapter 4. The next morning, before I had even fully woken up, Anna was already causing a ruckus in the living room. Diana didn't bother to stop her and continued making noise in the kitchen. William just sat on the sofa, smiling as he watched them both. Perhaps this was the image of a family of 3 that he had envisioned in his mind. I made an excuse to go grocery shopping and hurried out the door. As soon as I stepped outside, I let out a deep breath. Why is Nicole back? Didn't you say you were going to visit your in-laws? My neighbor, Hongjie, approached when she saw me leave. Her words were full of playful teasing. It's not my in-laws. Hongjie froze for a moment before laughing, thinking I was just shy. Right. Not yet your in-laws, Nicole. You'll change the way you call them once you get married. When she saw my face, which no longer carried the usual smile, Hongjie hesitated for a second but couldn't help herself. She lowered her voice and scolded me. While you were gone these past few days, William brought women back to the house. I asked him about it, and he actually said it was you who agreed to it. That woman looks like a fox spirit. And you still approved? You two aren't even married yet. Silly girl, you should be more aware of these things. If I were a few years younger, with William's conditions, I'd be tempted too. But all these women just keep coming after him. You better keep your boundaries clear. Even with one woman after another. There was only Diana standing next to William. She didn't need to be paranoid. William would provide her with all the confidence she needed. What I hadn't expected, though, was that William would tell others that I was the one who had agreed to it. He was clearly going to great lengths to avoid any dirt falling on Diana's reputation. He was really putting in the effort. But there were some things I couldn't say just yet. Hongjie, seeing my soft demeanor, clicked her tongue and, in the end, repeatedly reminded me to be more vigilant at home. When I returned, the living room was empty, but I could hear rustling sounds coming from the basement. After a while, Anna bounced upstairs, holding a torn and tattered piece of paper. I focused my gaze and realized it was a portrait I had drawn of William last New Year's Day. In the picture, the man still looked aloof, but his lips were curved with a faint smile. The room was warm, like spring, and outside, fireworks were bursting in the night sky. In those few hours, William's eyes had only had room for me. At that time, I had always thought that after marriage, we would repeat that simple happiness many times. But I never expected that would be the only time he had looked at me seriously. The picture in Anna's hands was already damaged, with sticky sugar stains on the paper. Behind her, Diana had followed her up. The child doesn't understand. Nicole, you won't mind, right? Her voice was soft, but the smugness and disdain in her eyes were evident. If you know she doesn't understand, then teach her better. Diana was caught off guard by my response and paused for a second. Children are the best at reading the atmosphere. And Anna suddenly rushed forward. With her dirty little hand, she slapped my skirt, leaving a black handprint. You're not allowed to bully my aunt. The little girl's voice was sharp and shrill. William rushed into the room, snatching Anna up into his arms. But I didn't look at him. My gaze went to the fallen piece of paper. William, following my eyes, froze for a moment. He clearly understood something. He wanted to say something, but then swallowed it back. Diana looked more pleased, though her eyes were reddening. William, I'm sorry. It's my fault for not looking after Anna. I let out a light laugh, which sounded strange in the stillness. 3 pairs of eyes immediately turned to look at me. I picked up the picture, holding it up to the light. I didn't draw it right at the time. The light in the room wasn't that bright. With that, I tossed the picture into the trash can and walked into the kitchen with a blank expression. William suddenly looked up, staring blankly at my back. He didn't care about Anna, who was still upset. William followed me into the kitchen. He hesitated for a while before speaking awkwardly. I've been working on finding a new house these past few days. In a couple of days, Diana will take Anna and move out. I know that women often have conflicts, but can you please bear with it a little longer? I didn't even think about it before replying. Sure. After all, there were still 3 days left before I left. The house technically belonged to the Koo family, and how they chose to lock themselves away in this house was none of my business. I had agreed too quickly, and William was left speechless. His face shifted from pale to green, looking quite uncomfortable. He thought I was angry about what had just happened, sighed, and tried to pull me back. Anna's still a child. I've told you many times. I'm taking care of them because it was my brother's request. Diana isn't easy either. Don't always think of her in such a dirty way. I sneered. So, you brought her back and said it was my idea? William's breath caught, and he opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. I laughed. See, no matter how many noble-sounding excuses he made, his inner restlessness and dirty thoughts couldn't deceive him. Out of respect for our parents, I didn't want to ruin his career, but that was all I could do. Chapter 5. The next morning, I woke up early. The scene with Anna from yesterday reminded me of something. There should still be some of my things in the basement. Since they were still asleep, I decided to go down and collect my belongings. I had lived in this house for years. Even though I had prepared ahead of time for over 10 days, there were still many things left behind. I packed everything carefully, for the rest of my life. This lifetime. I no longer wanted any connection with William. Since I had decided to leave, I would leave thoroughly. In the end, I packed 3 large bags of stuff. When I opened the door, I saw William had already made breakfast. When he saw what I was holding, William froze. Where are you going with all this stuff? I replied flatly, throwing away the garbage. There's too much useless stuff. William glanced at the bags, then turned and knocked on the door next door. Diana, wake up Anna. Breakfast is ready. At the dining table. As soon as Anna saw me, she snorted and moved the breakfast toward herself and Diana. William brought over the fried eggs and smiled. You're up. Come here. I made fried eggs. He turned and saw what was on Anna and Diana's plates, giving a forced smile. Good girl, Anna. Can you share some with Aunt? I ignored them all and walked out of the room. There were still a few days before school started. All the necessary paperwork was done. I planned to exchange some spare foreign currency. Also, to check if I needed to buy anything else. Once everything was settled, I booked a hotel room. It was only 2 days. But being around William every day, with our heads down and no words exchanged, was really unbearable, since he thought I was jealous of Diana. Let him think that. It was the perfect excuse for me to move out. Everything ready. I returned home, but to my surprise, Anna was playing with my passport. My mind went blank. What are you doing? I snatched the passport from her hands, and Anna was startled. Falling off the table, her heart-wrenching cries brought Diana rushing from the other room. What are you doing? Who told you to bully Anna? Diana pushed me, hurriedly picking the child up in her arms. I was trembling with rage, carefully putting the passport back in my bag. Bully her? You should see what she did. Who told you to touch my things? Get out! Diana stood up with Anna in her arms, glaring at me coldly. Humph. You're not even married to William yet. You have no say here. She walked to the door, paused, and turned around. Even if you do get married, you'll never win against me. The door slammed shut behind her. Diana's hostility towards me always came out when William wasn't around. In the past, I always backed away when facing her. She had traveled all over with William, gradually becoming someone who could stand on her own. Everyone said Diana was beautiful and capable. In comparison, I was just a housewife. Far less impressive. But now, living this life again, I suddenly felt at ease. She might be excellent, but I have my own strengths. Why should I be weighed against Diana? Because of William? He's not worth it. Is there nothing else in my life besides William? I can continue my education. I can contribute to the advancement of medicine. I can go out, expand my horizons, and gain new knowledge. This muddy swamp here would only hinder my steps. As for Diana, when I first came back, I did think of getting revenge on her. In my past life, she had destroyed my marriage. I even thought about causing a scene outside their company or exposing her online. But what good would it do? As long as William wants to, he can find 100 ways to continue helping Diana. Besides, if William wasn't moved, even if Diana stood naked in front of him, he wouldn't glance at her. What's the point? It was just a love that went off track. I don't want to waste my life dealing with it anymore. So I turned to Diana and said seriously, listen, no matter what relationship you and William have, whether you admit it or not, it has nothing to do with me anymore. I won't marry him. If you understand that, then you should focus more of your energy on William, not try to provoke me. Otherwise, I might change my mind at any time. Diana was stunned. She waved her hand, about to deny it. But then, as if afraid of really angering me, she reluctantly returned to her room. I finished packing and took one last look at the apartment. Looking around, it was filled with traces of other women's lives. There was nothing to be nostalgic about. I turned and walked away. Chapter 6. Back at the hotel, I quickly tidied up and started drafting a message to William. Despite everything he had done wrong to me in this life, up until now, William had supported my life and provided me with a place to stay. In our past life, we had wasted each other's time, and in the end, everything was unclear. If possible, in this life, I still wanted to clear things up. In the message, I didn't mention my whereabouts. I simply told him I had decided to continue pursuing my medical doctorate. As for our engagement, he didn't want to marry me, and I didn't want to marry him either. So it was over. From now on, we would each find our own happiness. Before I could send the message, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find William standing outside. He looked out of breath, as though he had been running for a while. What are you doing here? He gasped for air. I finally found you. It's all right. It's all right. I paused, thinking he was about to scold me again. Okay, don't be angry. Come back with me. William squeezed inside and started gathering my things. I turned off my phone screen and held it behind my back, but his gaze shifted, landing on the passport on the desk. William's expression changed dramatically. Where are you going? I froze, annoyed at myself for not putting everything away properly. This afternoon Anna was rummaging through my stuff, and I was afraid she might ruin it. So I brought it out. Seeing that my tone seemed natural, William let out a sigh of relief. You should store it properly. You'll need it for our honeymoon. He handed me the passport and advised me to keep it in my bag. I accepted it without protest. Then, I held down his hand as he packed. William frowned. What's wrong? Still mad? Anna was wrong. But she's just a child. Stop making a scene. I just find it strange. I said. Anna has always been well behaved. But every time you come back, there's always conflict between you two. Before I could finish, William seemed to hesitate. And when he saw my calm look, he couldn't continue. I only asked him one question. Does Diana know you came to find me? William's face darkened with frustration. What does that have to do with her? Why do you keep bringing up Diana? I ignored him and continued. I guess she doesn't know. Otherwise you wouldn't be standing here. I'm your fiancé. If I'm upset, you should come find me. That's only natural. But why? On a subconscious level, don't you want to tell her? Why do you always avoid anything related to me when she's around? Every time I argue with you, you say it's because you're being considerate of your brother. But there are so many brothers. Why do you care so much about her? William. I called his name softly. If you don't love me, just let me go. William's face turned pale, and it seemed like his body swayed for a moment. After a long pause, he finally said in a strained voice, Since you're not coming back, then think about it here properly. I'll come pick you up in a few days. With that, William turned and rushed out. I never thought of abandoning you. I'll go back and prepare for the wedding." Listening to his hurried footsteps fading away, I expressionlessly closed the door. How ridiculous. It was as if, in his eyes, he thought that preparing for a wedding and marrying me was some great favor to me, and that I should be grateful beyond words. After William left, I checked in for my flight on my phone. Then I went out and had dinner with a close friend from school. After graduation, everyone went their separate ways, and when I return, some of them might be hard to see again. During the meal, my closest friend hesitated, seemingly wanting to say something. She knew a little about my relationship with William. "Nicole, didn't you say you were going to get married after graduation? Why are you going abroad to study again?" Long-distance relationships are difficult for many couples to maintain. I smiled and shook my head. "I'm not getting married." Then I raised my glass. "To put it simply, the world is so big. I want to see it. So, here's to youth, to friendship, and to myself." When I got home, I took an early shower and went to bed. I thought it would be another night of tossing and turning. But instead, I had a peaceful sleep and woke up to the morning light. After waking up, I went straight to the airport. Before boarding, I sent the message I had been editing for so long. After I sent it, my phone started vibrating uncontrollably. I immediately turned it off. When the plane took off, I felt a lightness in my body. In that moment, it felt like I saw my past self saying, "Thank you." Chapter 7. When the plane landed, and I truly stepped onto foreign soil, I suddenly wanted to cry. The step that had been impossible for me to take in my past life turned out to be so easy to achieve, as long as I wanted it. I collected my emotions and went to report to the school. In my previous life, I never had the chance to enter a university. This time, I cherished the opportunity beyond measure. Aside from eating and sleeping, I spent every other moment either in class or in the library. During this time, I also received 3 calls from William. The first was a month after the semester started. William had tried various means, and finally managed to get my number. When an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen, I had already guessed it was him. On the phone, William's emotions were intense. He said he disagreed with the cancellation of the engagement. He said that in his heart, I had always been his wife. Half a minute later, I hung up the phone. The second call came 2 months later. On a snowy day, William's tired voice reached me. He said he had arranged a house and job for Diana and had told her that they would never meet again. That day, I quietly listened to him. The last time William called me was on Christmas Day. It was snowing heavily, and this time, I was the one to speak first. I said, "William, today the semester grades came out. I got an A. At the start of the semester, it was really hard for me. I had to learn a new language while attending lectures, and also rush through experiments. The experiments didn't go smoothly. It was a never-ending series of failures. No one knew when we would see results." William listened carefully on the other end, his breath light. Finally, I said, "But you know, William, I'm really happy. I'll never trap myself again." On the other end, William's voice suddenly became choked. His tired voice sounded again, "But I really miss you." You see, his subject is still I. He never cared about the escape of my soul, even in his moments of pleading. After that phone call, I cried freely on the streets of a foreign country. In my past life, no matter how difficult it was, I had screamed, hated, and regretted, but I never shed a tear. I had almost forgotten the feeling of crying. I wiped my tears away and began to study even harder. During my second year of doctoral studies, I made a breakthrough in one of my experiments, although there was still a long road from the experiment to clinical application. If I kept moving forward, thousands of patients would benefit in the future. Late every night, when I raised my head from the lab, looking at my fellow students still immersed in their work, I would feel an inexplicable force pushing me forward. Fighting for my dreams felt so fulfilling. Later, I learned from my classmates that William had gotten married. His partner was Diana. My classmates spoke carefully, perhaps considering my feelings, and began to explain. I heard William has been working on opening a branch near where you are studying. When Diana found out, she went to cause a scene, but I'm not sure of the details. All I know is, the next morning, they woke up in the same bed. William refused to agree, but Diana was pregnant. I didn't say anything in response. In this life, he still entered marriage for responsibility's sake. As a son, as a father, but never as a husband. At the end of the conversation, a classmate suddenly sighed. When you went abroad to study, I thought leaving William was a loss for you. But now, I think, a woman living for herself is the real brilliance. Nicole, you really have earned our respect now. 7 years later, I graduated with my PhD. I returned to my homeland with a pile of research achievements. From then on, my life was filled with good memories.